Zoe stepped into the Texas reunion hall like a woman who had rebuilt her life from the inside out. Her maroon dress fit her with quiet elegance, the kind that didn't need approval from anyone. Soft chatter echoed through the wide room, but when she walked in, something subtle shifted. Not because she tried to be noticed, she never lived for an audience, but because confidence has a way of carrying its own spotlight. She scanned the crowd for familiar faces from work, expecting nothing more than polite greetings and professional smiles. This event was supposed to be routine, a simple company reunion, people catching up, new hires shaking hands, old coworkers bonding over memories. That's what she planned for. But across the room, life had its own plans. Michael stood surrounded by a small circle of admirers, dressed in a tailored navy suit that tried too hard to say he had everything under control. His arm rested around the woman beside him, a blonde, glowing wife whose rounded belly declared motherhood in a way that drew instant attention. Michael rubbed her stomach with a proud smile, the kind of smile he once reserved for Zoe. "This is our first," he announced to the group. "We're so excited." The words floated across the hall like a challenge thrown at fate. Zoe didn't flinch. She had lived through pain sharper than whispers, deeper than memories. She watched him without bitterness, without longing, without shrinking. She had come too far to let an old wound reopen just because someone else was performing happiness. She turned toward the refreshments table, but that's when destiny made its first bold move. A pair of small voices pierced the room, bright and unmistakably full of love. "Mommy!" Head snapped toward the entrance. Carrie and Tara sprinted inside, their little shoes tapping against the polished floor, their laughter bouncing off every wall. They ran straight toward Zoe, with arms wide open and joy that couldn't be contained. The room fell silent, conversations halted, glances shifted between the twins and Michael. People didn't whisper, but they wanted to. It was written across their faces, the timing, the resemblance, the truth forming in their minds faster than breath. Carrie's eyes, calm, curious, carried the same gentle shape as Michael's. Tara's bright, bold smile looked like a small, fearless version of the man who once doubted their mother. Every gaze in the room snapped back to him. His wife's hand froze midair on her belly. Michael's expression changed instantly. His smile slipped, his shoulders stiffened. His confidence cracked like thin ice under unexpected weight, but the tension had only begun to build. The room didn't breathe. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not a murmur dared to interrupt the moment unfolding in front of them. Zoe rose slowly, holding one twin on each side, calm as ever. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't performing. She was simply a mother tending to her children, in the very place where a truth she never planned to reveal had just announced itself. Across the hall, Michael's wife glanced between Zoe and the twins with confusion growing by the second. Her hand slipped from her stomach as her eyes narrowed, searching for context that her husband had never given her. But Michael, he didn't move. He stared at the twins like the ground beneath him had shifted. The confidence he wore minutes ago evaporated, replaced by a look that held shock, guilt, recognition, and something that cut deeper than all of that. Fear, not fear of Zoe, not fear of the girls, but fear of the truth finally catching up to him. Carrie tugged gently on Zoe's dress. "Mommy, can we get juice?" "Yes, baby," Zoe said softly. "Let Mommy stand for a moment." She lifted her eyes, and just like that, Michael's world collapsed. He walked forward in slow, uneven steps, as if his body wasn't sure it wanted to approach what his heart already knew. When he reached them, his voice barely held together. His eyes lowered to the twins again. Zoe didn't soften. She didn't harden either. She just answered with steady calm. "They're 4. The sound that moved through the room wasn't a whisper. It was a shock wave. 4. 4 years. 4 years since the divorce. 4 years since his family blamed her. 4 years since he stood silent while she was accused of being the problem. 4 years since he walked away." His wife inhaled sharply, her hand flying to her mouth. Michael's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered between the girls' faces, the familiar features he could no longer deny, and Zoe's unshaken expression. The moment the truth landed with full weight. The moment everyone realized that the woman who had once been mocked, doubted, and dismissed had carried a miracle alone. The room felt heavier now, thick with realization. CO workers exchanged glances, but no one dared speak. Even the music playing in the background seemed too loud for the silence in people's minds. Zoe exhaled slowly, knowing exactly what they were all thinking. And now, she looked ahead, her face composed, her voice rich with meaning. "Have you ever carried a truth so heavy that revealing it could break someone who once broke you?" Her question didn't echo in the hall. It echoed in the hearts of everyone listening, and it sets the stage for everything that follows. Michael stood frozen, staring at the twins as if time itself had trapped him. The confidence he arrived was gone. Whatever story he had built, whatever image he thought he controlled, was now shaking right in front of him. His wife shifted uncomfortably beside him, her expression tight with questions she wasn't prepared to ask in public. The situation no longer belonged to whispers or suspicion. It belonged to truth. Zoe didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence alone held power. The past wasn't in this room to haunt her. It was here to remind everyone who had carried the weight and who had survived it. She looked at Michael, not angry, not bitter, just resolved. In that moment, the deeper reality surfaced. This wasn't just a reunion. This was accountability. This was the day life showed its receipts. And for the audience watching the story unfold, Zoe's journey tapped into something universal. She survived blame she didn't deserve. She endured infertility accusations that were never her fault. She walked through a divorce that broke her more than she admitted. She raised twins alone, not because she wanted to hide them, but because peace meant protecting them. Now the world he built on assumptions stood face to face with the truth she protected. Zoe's voice, when it came, wasn't loud, just grounded, steady, sure. Some storms don't come to destroy you. They come to reveal who was never meant to walk beside you. Then she looked toward the viewers, the people who would hear her story through the narrator and learn from the scars she carried with grace. Sometimes life puts you in a situation where your silence speaks louder than anything you could ever explain. Zoe didn't fight back with anger. She didn't chase validation. She didn't argue with the people who blamed her. She didn't try to prove she was worthy. She simply lived. And the truth came forward on its own. She held her daughter's hands, grounding herself in the love that saved her. And now, what would you do if the family who doubted you, the partner who abandoned you, suddenly discovered the miracle you carried alone? Would you confront them? Would you walk away? Would you protect your peace? Would you let the truth speak for you? Life has a way of revealing everything at the exact time it's meant to be seen. Before we continue, please like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps this channel grow, and it tells YouTube to share this story with more people who need it. Welcome back to Mr. Dave Stories, where every story reminds us that growth is possible, healing is real, and lessons are everywhere. If this is your first time here, we're honored to have you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story that might uplift, inspire, or change the way you see life. Southeast Texas had a way of shaping people quietly. It wasn't just the heat, though the sun could press against your skin like it was trying to test your patience. It wasn't just the long stretches of highway or the soft drawl in people's voices. It was something else, something in the rhythm of daily life, in the persistence needed to keep going when nothing came easy. Zoe grew up right in the middle of that rhythm. Her neighborhood was a cluster of modest buildings that carried the smell of cooked meals in the evenings and the sound of porch talk on weekends. Families knew each other. Aunties kept their eyes on every child like their own, and everyone understood that life might not hand you comfort, but it would hand you community. Zoe didn't grow up with luxury, but she grew up with people who pushed her forward even when she didn't realize she needed pushing. Her earliest memories were wrapped in the voice of her mother, a woman who lived in the space between exhaustion and determination. She worked 2 jobs, often leaving the house, before the sun fully rose and coming home long after the streetlights flickered on. Yet somehow, she always managed to greet Zoe with a soft smile, even on days when her body begged for rest. "Baby, life don't pause for nobody," her mother would say. "You just learn to walk with it." It wasn't meant to be poetic. It was simply the truth she had learned to survive. And Zoe absorbed every syllable. Their apartment was small and old enough to complain through squeaky floors and humming pipes, but it held warmth. On Sunday mornings, the scent of cornbread filled every room. On Saturdays, Zoe helped her mother braid her hair in front of the mirror as they talked about school, work, and the kind of life Zoe could build if she kept her focus sharp. Money was always tight. Light bills and grocery lists competed for priority. Zoe learned how to stretch every dollar, how to cook with whatever they had, and how to accept help without letting it weaken her pride. At 16, she picked up her first job at a grocery store, stacking canned soups and sweeping aisles after closing. She didn't mind the work. Hard work felt familiar to her. It felt like home. She often walked to her job even when the Texas heat felt heavy. Older women on the block would call out from their porches, "Zoe, you walking with intention again. Where you off to now, baby? Go on, girl, make that money." Their voices weren't loud, but they carried encouragement that lasted longer than they knew. Zoe would smile, wave, and keep going. She didn't have the luxury of slowing down. She had goals even before she knew how to define them. She wanted a life where choosing between electricity and groceries wasn't a recurring conversation. She wanted to give her mother a break from being strong every second of her life. By the time Zoe turned 23, She had earned her associate's degree through evening classes, worked her way into an administrative role at a logistics company, and saved enough to move herself and her mother into a better apartment. It was a 2-bedroom place on the west side, with brighter walls and a kitchen window that let in actual sunlight. The day she handed her mother the key, her mother held it gently, almost as if it might disappear. "You did this, baby?" "We did this," Zoe corrected. Her mother pulled her into a hug, one of those long, grounding ones that told Zoe she had honored every sacrifice her mother ever made. For the first time in a long time, Zoe felt the edges of her life softening. She wasn't rich, she wasn't coasting, but she had built stability step by step. For a while she allowed herself to breathe. Then came the workshop. It was hosted in a renovated warehouse by the river, one of those spaces with exposed brick and industrial lights hanging from long black wires. Several Texas companies had come together to offer career development sessions and networking opportunities. Zoe attended because she took every chance to grow. She arrived early, took a seat near the front, opened her notebook, and clicked her pen twice out of habit. She didn't notice Michael at first. He walked in with quiet confidence, dressed neatly in a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled just enough to make him look relaxed without being casual. His presence didn't demand attention. He simply carried himself like someone who had never needed to worry about life's basic necessities. Zoe caught a glimpse of him as he took a seat 2 rows behind her, but she didn't linger on the thought. She had seen men like him before, comfortable, sheltered, unaware of the struggles people like her faced daily. Nothing about him suggested he would notice her. But he did. When the speaker paused to adjust the equipment, Michael leaned forward with a half smile. "You're taking better notes than the presenter." Zoe blinked in mild surprise. "Maybe you should let me teach it then." Michael chuckled softly. "I'd pay attention." She faced forward again, keeping her expression neutral. She wasn't used to being approached by men like him, not in a genuine way, but she wasn't rude. She just didn't assume interest meant anything. After the workshop, she stepped aside to check her phone when Michael approached her again. "Hi," he said, almost shy now. "This is probably forward, but could I get your number?" Zoe lifted an eyebrow. The polite decline was already forming on her tongue, but before she could release it, he raised his hands defensively. "Sorry, too fast. You seem interesting. Not in a weird way, just truly." His sincerity caught her off guard. "Give me your number," she said finally. His eyes widened. "Really? You said you're not usually this forward," she shrugged, "so I'll go first." She typed her information into his phone and handed it back. His expression lit up like he had won something unexpected. What Zoe didn't know then, but life would reveal later, was that Michael admired her strength without fully understanding the weight she carried. He saw the polished version of her without knowing the storms that shaped her. Their first date was simple: iced coffee for her, hot chocolate for him because, according to him, coffee makes me feel like I swallowed a battery. Zoe laughed harder than she expected. She wasn't someone who laughed easily, but Michael found ways to crack through her defenses. "That sound right there," he told her, "is the highlight of my week." She rolled her eyes, trying not to smile, but smiling came naturally around him. Michael introduced Zoe to his suburban world slowly. His home was spotless, decorated with matching dishware and neatly arranged bookshelves. It felt foreign to Zoe at first, too quiet, too orderly, but Michael didn't make her feel out of place, at least not in those early days. "My family is traditional," he warned one evening. "They mean well, but they don't always understand people outside their bubble." Zoe didn't take the comment lightly, but she nodded. "We'll see." She didn't meet his family until 6 months later, and when she did, she understood exactly what Michael meant. His mother greeted her with a smile that felt overly controlled. His father shook her hand with minimal interest. They were polite, but not welcoming. Zoe kept her composure. She had endured harder environments than cold politeness. Michael did his best to compensate, praising her accomplishments, asking about her job, offering her multiple drink options she didn't need. He tried so hard that it nearly exposed his discomfort. Zoe sensed the tension but pushed it aside. Early differences didn't have to grow into problems, not if both people were willing to work. For now, the story between Zoe and Michael was still tender, still hopeful, still full of long conversations and quiet affection. Zoe had no idea how much life was preparing her. She had no idea how much she would carry, and she had no idea that the man smiling across a coffee table would one day question the very thing her body was fully capable of doing. But for the moment, the path still felt warm beneath her feet. The early days of Zoe and Michael's relationship felt effortless. They were still in that stage where curiosity softened differences and affection blurred sharp edges. Zoe liked the steadiness of his presence. The way he listened with genuine interest when she talked about her childhood or her goals. Michael seemed captivated by the strength she carried so naturally, even when she didn't highlight it. But as their connection grew deeper, something else quietly surfaced, the invisible gap between their worlds. Zoe had built her life piece by piece through sheer determination. Michael, on the other hand, came from a life where effort was often buffered by convenience. It wasn't arrogance on his part, it was simply the environment he grew up in. He didn't fully understand the choices people like Zoe had to make every day because he'd never been forced to make them himself. Still, their affection flourished. Every date brought them closer. Every conversation revealed something new. Michael liked to pick her up in his car, making sure she never had to walk home after work. Zoe insisted she didn't mind walking, it was normal for her, but Michael insisted anyway. "It's not about the ride," he would say with a small grin. "It's about having more time with you." Zoe would shake her head but smile, letting him have his way. One evening after dinner, they sat in his car for nearly an hour just talking about childhood memories, music tastes, dreams they hadn't said aloud in years. Zoe found herself laughing in ways she hadn't in a long time. Michael made space for her joy without demanding anything in return. Yet underneath those sweet moments, deeper differences began to show. One Saturday afternoon, Michael invited Zoe to spend the day at his home. His house was in a quiet suburb, where lawns were manicured and sidewalks were lined with neatly planted trees. Zoe appreciated the tranquility, even though it felt nothing like the neighborhood she grew up in. Inside, the house was spotless, not just clean but arranged with intention, matching decor, neat shelving, a kitchen island that looked barely used. Zoe hadn't grown up in an environment where everything matched. She had grown up in a home where everything had history. She felt just a little out of place, but Michael made an effort to ease her discomfort. "Make yourself at home," he said. "I want you to feel comfortable here." She nodded, appreciating the gesture. Still, she walked through the rooms carefully, aware of her environment in a way Michael didn't have to be. Later that evening, they prepared dinner together. Zoe took the lead, chopping vegetables with ease, seasoning each dish by instinct. Michael tried to help, but he struggled to keep up, often stopping to ask, "Is this enough? Or how do you cut this without your fingers protesting?" She laughed softly. "Just keep your fingers out of the way. That's the trick." Michael grinned, enjoying her teasing. They worked well together, different approaches, same purpose. But there were moments, small ones, that hinted at the world Michael came from, like when Zoe suggested they pack leftovers. He said lightly, "Let's just throw it out. I don't really eat leftovers." She paused. "Throw it out? We made all this food." He shrugged. "It's fine. We can cook again tomorrow." Zoe didn't argue, but something tugged at her. Growing up, leftovers weren't an afterthought. They were the next day's lunch, dinner, or both. But it was difference, born from two separate realities. The next shift came when Michael invited her to a small gathering at his parents' home. Zoe prepared herself mentally. She wanted to make a good impression, not because she needed approval, but because she respected the role parents played in people's lives. She arrived wearing a simple but elegant dress, hair styled neatly, makeup soft and understated. When she walked into the house, she was greeted warmly enough, but something felt measured. His mother approached with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Zoe, right? We've heard so much about you." Zoe extended her hand politely. "Thank you for having me." His mother took her hand lightly, her gaze flicking over Zoe's dress, her shoes, her hair, observing but not welcoming. Michael's father offered a quick handshake before returning to his conversation with a group of older men. Zoe felt a shift in the air but ignored it, determined not to let discomfort show. She followed Michael into the living room, where he introduced her to relatives and family friends. At first, the conversation was pleasant enough, but then came the comments, subtle, carefully wrapped, yet sharp enough to cut if you listened closely. "So Zoe," his mother asked, "what do you do again?" "I work in logistics administration," Zoe replied. "Oh, office work," his mother said with a nod. "Stable, I suppose?" Zoe swallowed but smiled politely. Another relative chimed in. "Did you grow up around here?" "Southeast Texas," Zoe answered. "Oh," the woman said, in that tone people used when they believed they had decoded someone's entire life in a single detail. "Nice. Very. Homegrown." There was no insult in the words, but there was judgment in the delivery, the kind that suggested Zoe came from a place they didn't expect their son's partner to come from. Michael noticed Zoe's posture shift. He placed a hand on her back, trying to smooth over the tension. "They mean well," he whispered. Zoe didn't respond. She had learned long ago that sometimes people hide sharp thoughts behind soft voices. As the evening continued, the comments persisted. Her braids were described as lively. Her accent was described as interesting. Michael tried to steer conversations away when he sensed discomfort, but he never addressed the comments directly. He never said, "That's not appropriate." He never said, "Stop talking to her like that," and that was the first sign. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, but a quiet reminder that love alone could not close the gap between their worlds. Still, Zoe didn't allow early frictions to define their relationship. She liked Michael. He showed up for her. He listened. He supported her goals. He made her laugh on days she had nothing to laugh about. He respected her hard work. He admired her resilience. He cherished their time together. Their love grew steadily. They talked about building a future, slowly, with intention. Michael spoke of marriage, and Zoe didn't panic. She felt seen in ways she hadn't expected to be seen. But even during those bright moments, the contrast between their backgrounds lingered quietly beneath the surface. Zoe lived in a world shaped by discipline and necessity. Michael lived in a world shaped by comfort and expectation. Neither world was wrong, but neither world knew how to fully understand the other. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet cafe, Michael asked gently, "Do you ever feel like we're different?" Zoe took a sip of her drink before answering. "Yes, I think anyone would notice. Does it bother you?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Only when difference becomes something people use to rank worth." Michael frowned. "You're not less than anyone." "I know," Zoe said, "but not everyone sees it that way." Her voice was calm, but the meaning ran deep. Michael reached across the table, taking her hand. "I'm with you, that's all that matters." Zoe wanted to believe him completely, and part of her did. But life has a way of testing even the strongest intentions. Their relationship continued, with tenderness, laughter, shared meals, and long conversations. They talked about moving in together. They dreamed softly about futures shaped by both their strengths. Still, in the quiet spaces where truth lingers, Zoe sensed something shifting, not between them, but around them. Cultural and financial differences didn't shout. They whispered, and those whispers were beginning to form cracks neither of them fully recognized yet. But for now, love still felt warm. The storm hadn't arrived, and Zoe still believed that two people from different worlds could build one life, if they worked hard enough. She had no idea what challenges waited ahead. She had no idea how deep those quiet differences could cut, and she had no idea how much she would carry before her story truly began. Michael proposed on a quiet evening in late spring, a moment that felt simple, natural, and unforced. They were sitting on his living room floor surrounded by takeout containers and half-finished conversations when he reached into his pocket with a nervous breath. "Zoe," he began, his voice unsteady in a way she had never heard before. "I don't want to imagine a future that doesn't have you in it." Her heart softened. He wasn't perfect, but he was consistent. He showed up when she needed him. He respected her drive. He appreciated her strength without mocking it or minimizing it. And she loved him, not with the dramatic glow people fantasize about, but with the grounded, steady love built through time and sincerity. She said yes. Their wedding was not extravagant. They didn't invite a large crowd or try to impress anyone. It was intimate. Family, a few close friends, a soft instrumental track playing in the background. Zoe wore a simple white dress that hugged her figure just enough, and Michael wore a dark suit that fit him well. They exchanged vows that reflected hope, partnership, and the belief that together they could rise above anything life threw at them. Zoe held onto that belief tightly in the early months of their marriage. She moved into Michael's home full-time, a transition that carried both excitement and adjustment. His neighborhood was calm and orderly, far quieter than the vibrant, crowded blocks she grew up in. Sometimes the silence felt peaceful. Other times it felt like something pressing against her ears, reminding her she was no longer surrounded by the familiar sounds of community. Still, she made the space feel like home, cooking meals, adding small touches, creating warmth in corners that once felt cold. Michael appreciated her efforts. He often came home, inhaled deeply, and said, "It smells like us in here." But outside their home, something else was forming, a tension, a pressure, a shift that neither of them recognized right away. It started with casual remarks from Michael's family. They weren't openly rude, but the undertone lingered. "So, any baby news yet?" his mother would ask within the first couple of months. Zoe would smile politely. "We're not rushing anything." His mother's smile tightened. "Of course not. But you're not young forever." Michael would clear his throat and say, "Mom, relax." But he didn't correct the behavior. He didn't acknowledge how invasive the question was. He didn't say, "This isn't appropriate." He simply brushed it off, again and again. As months passed, the questioning became routine. "How long have you been trying? Have you talked to a doctor yet?" At first, Zoe took the comments lightly. She didn't want to give unnecessary weight to ignorance, but repeated remarks have a way of carving into a person, not with knives, but with small, targeted scratches. Then came one comment she would never forget. During a Sunday dinner, Michael's father said in a matter-of-fact tone, Well, if conception hasn't happened naturally by now, the issue is usually on the woman's side. Michael's mother nodded knowingly, her expression soft but loaded. Zoe sat frozen in her seat, her fork paused halfway to her mouth, her heart tightened painfully. Her fingers curled slightly beneath the table. Michael shifted uncomfortably but said nothing, not one word in her defense. Zoe swallowed her pain like medicine she didn't choose. Later that night, she confronted him. "You didn't say anything," she said quietly. "They didn't mean it like that," he replied, rubbing his forehead. "How else could they mean it?" Zoe asked. "They blamed me." "You're overthinking," he muttered. "Let it go." She stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to let them insult me and pretend it didn't happen?" "I'm saying it's not that deep." But to Zoe it was deeper than anything she had ever felt. Growing up, she watched her mother be strong without letting anyone question her worth. Now, in her own marriage, she was being spoken to as though her value depended on something she couldn't control. And the man she married, the man she shared a home and future with, chose silence. The emotional shift began there. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't explosive. It was steady, like a slow leak in something once airtight. Zoe noticed the way Michael avoided conversations about family. She noticed how his mother's tone sharpened every time she asked about conception. She noticed his father becoming more direct with his comments. She noticed her own heart withdrawing, not out of anger, but out of protection. Then came the doctor visits. Zoe agreed because she wanted clarity, not because she believed something was wrong, but because she wanted to remove ammunition from people who spoke without understanding. Test after test came back normal. Her body was fine, healthy, capable, but the emotional damage was already growing. One evening, after another disappointing conversation with his mother, Zoe sat alone in the bathroom staring at a test strip that showed a negative result. It wasn't sadness she felt. It was frustration, the kind that formed from carrying expectations she never asked to hold. She cried quietly, shoulders shaking, not because she believed something was wrong with her, but because she feared the narrative being built around her. The one where she was the problem. The one where she was not enough. Michael found her minutes later. "Hey, come here," he whispered, pulling her close. He simply wanted the moment to pass. Their marriage shifted into silence. Zoe slept with her back turned more often. Michael stayed late at work more often. They became strangers sharing a home. And then came the moment everything cracked. It was a Sunday afternoon. Zoe had spent hours preparing gumbo, hoping to revive the warmth they once shared around meals. The house smelled inviting. The table was set. She sat waiting for Michael to return from visiting his parents. When he finally walked in, his shoulders were tense, his face strained. "What happened?" Zoe asked, setting down her spoon. Michael sat heavily at the table. "I'm tired," he said. "Tired of what? All of this. The pressure, the questions, the waiting." Zoe felt her chest squeeze. "We're going through this together." "That's not how it feels," he murmured. "What does your mother think now?" Zoe asked cautiously. Michael hesitated. She thinks maybe we weren't compatible from the start." Zoe's breath caught. "Compatible how?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Silence delivered the blow. Zoe set down the towel in her hand and straightened her posture. "Michael, do you blame me?" He looked up, eyes full of things he refused to say. That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time. Within 3 months, arguments replaced conversations. Michael filed for divorce first. He said they wanted different things. He said separation was the best option. There was no fight, no dramatic scene, just quiet paperwork and a void where their future used to be. Zoe packed her things, hollow but steady. She walked out believing she had failed, only to discover weeks later that she had been carrying something life-changing. 2 heartbeats, 2 daughters, 2 miracles. Carrie and Tara were already forming inside her body the day she signed the divorce papers. She had no idea then just how much those girls would save her, or how deeply the truth would one day expose everything Michael thought he knew about her. Grief doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just sits in the chest like a stone that refuses to move. That's what Zoe carried when she walked out of Michael's house for the last time. No suitcase heavy enough to compare, no words sharp enough to describe that weight. She kept her face still as she drove back to her mother's apartment, but inside her was a quiet ache that followed her through every hallway, every room, every night. It wasn't the divorce papers that hurt. It wasn't even the arguments. It was the slow realization that she had spent years shrinking herself for a man who didn't know how to protect her. She had bent until she nearly broke, and when she finally snapped, the person who should have held her together simply watched her fall apart. When she walked into her mother's apartment, the smell of dinner hit her first, warm rice, seasoned chicken, and a hint of garlic. Her mother poked her head out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. You back earlier than I thought, she said gently. Zoe nodded, setting her small suitcase by the wall. It's done. Her mother didn't press for details. She simply walked over, cupped Zoe's chin, and studied her face with the kind of understanding that mothers develop long before their children speak. Baby, you don't have to talk tonight, she whispered. Just breathe. And Zoe did. For the first time in months, she let herself breathe without trying to hold anything together. Grief turned into routine. Zoe went back to work, moving slowly but steadily. She answered emails, processed paperwork, handled logistics calls, but her attention drifted often. She tried to eat, but some days food tasted like nothing. Her mother gently reminded her to rest, to hydrate, to sleep. Zoe didn't complain. She simply nodded and moved through each day like she was learning how to exist all over again. But 3 weeks after the divorce, her body stopped cooperating. At first, it was the morning nausea, sharp, sudden waves that made her grip the bathroom sink until her arms shook. Zoe brushed it off as stress. Heartache could twist the stomach in strange ways. But then came the second morning, then the third, then the fourth. Her mother sat across from her at breakfast, studying her closely. Zoe, she asked quietly, when was your last cycle? Zoe froze. Her mind raced, but she couldn't find the answer. Everything had been so emotionally heavy these past few weeks that she hadn't noticed her own body trying to speak. I don't know, Zoe whispered. Her mother didn't panic. She didn't judge. She simply stood up, grabbed her keys and said, come on, we're getting a test. They returned home with 3 tests, because certainty mattered when your entire life might shift. Zoe sat on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to her chest as she waited for the first test to process. Her heart thudded like a quiet drum against her ribs. She didn't dare hope. She didn't dare fear. She just stared at the small plastic window. A minute passed. 2 lines. Her breath caught. She reached shakily for the second test. 2 lines again. The third. 2 lines. Zoe pressed a hand to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Not the tears she shed during the divorce, heavy with defeat, but something lighter, something she hadn't felt in far too long. Her mother knocked softly. Baby. Zoe opened the door. Her mother took one look at her and understood. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, pulling Zoe into her arms. You're carrying life. Zoe nodded against her mother's shoulder. Mama, I'm pregnant. Her mother held her tighter, rocking her gently. You're not alone. Not today. Not ever. For the first time since she left Michael's world behind, something inside Zoe flickered. Something warm. Hope. The clinic was quiet, painted in soft colors that reminded Zoe of calm summer mornings. She lay on the examination table, staring at the ceiling as the doctor prepared the ultrasound equipment. You ready? The doctor asked kindly. Zoe nodded. The cool gel touched her stomach. The machine hummed softly. The doctor's expression shifted almost instantly, not in alarm, but in mild surprise. Well, she said slowly, adjusting the wand, it appears we're celebrating more than one blessing today. Zoe frowned. What does that mean? It means... The doctor turned the screen slightly. There are 2 heartbeats. Zoe blinked, unable to process the words. 2? 2, the doctor repeated with a smile. You're carrying twins. Zoe inhaled sharply as tears spilled down her cheeks. She covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed by the miracle forming inside her. Twins. 2 babies. 2 blessings born right after a divorce rooted in blame and doubt. Her mother squeezed her shoulder. Look at God, she whispered, voice trembling. Zoe cried openly, tears of joy, tears of release, tears that finally washed the grief from the corners of her spirit. That night, Zoe sat in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ultrasound pictures. She traced the outlines with her thumb, whispering softly, You're real. You're both real. Something shifted inside her, something powerful, strength. Not the kind she performed in front of others, the deep kind, the kind that roots itself in purpose. She wasn't living for Michael anymore. She wasn't living for his family's expectations. She wasn't living in the shadow of blame. She was living for 2 tiny hearts beating inside her. Her mother stepped into the doorway, leaning on the frame. How you feeling, baby? Zoe wiped her cheeks gently. Like I'm waking up for the first time in a long time. Her mother smiled. Those babies are your fresh start. Zoe nodded. They are. The weeks that followed were filled with gentle transformation. Zoe's mother cooked more often, always making sure her meals were warm and nourishing. She accompanied Zoe to appointments, helped her adjust to the physical changes, and spoke blessings over the babies every night. You're going to be a wonderful mother, her mother would say. Some days I'm scared, Zoe admitted once, rubbing her belly. That means you care, her mother said simply. And caring is the beginning of strength. Zoe absorbed every word. Together they prepared slowly for the arrival of the twins. Her mother found an old rocking chair and repainted it. Zoe began putting aside money for baby supplies. They reorganized the apartment to make space for cribs. Life wasn't easy. Life wasn't perfect. But life felt full again. And that fullness healed something inside Zoe that she thought would stay shattered forever. Because grief had taken part of her spirit, but motherhood was giving it back, little by little, heartbeat by heartbeat. Carrie and Tara were already reshaping the story she once believed had ended. This was her beginning again, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially her past, rob her of what came next. Pregnancy reshapes a woman long before birth ever does. It reshapes her routines, her emotions, her fears, her dreams, and for Zoe it reshaped the way she saw herself. In the months after learning she was carrying twins, Zoe's life began moving in a rhythm she had never known before. Some days felt like sunlight, calm, warm, steady. Other days felt like storms, fatigue crashing over her, nausea returning without warning, cravings appearing out of nowhere. But through every high and low, one truth carried her. She was becoming someone new, not someone created by heartbreak, but someone rebuilt by love she hadn't even met yet. In her second trimester, the symptoms intensified. Morning sickness extended far past the morning. Her lower back ached like it was holding two worlds, because it was. Her cravings grew stranger by the week. Her mother witnessed it all, shaking her head with affectionate disbelief whenever Zoe mixed odd combinations of food. One evening, Zoe stood in the kitchen spreading mustard onto a piece of toast. Her mother paused mid-step. "Now hold on. Baby, you sure about that?" Zoe sighed. "I don't know, Mama. The baby said they needed it." Her mother pressed her lips together to hide a smile. "Well, who am I to argue with two growing voices?" They laughed, a soft, needed laugh that broke through the weight of the past months. Pregnancy was exhausting, yes, but it was also healing. Her body, once the subject of whispered judgments, once blamed by Michael's family, was now proving something profound. There had never been anything wrong with her. Not her worth, not her womanhood, not her ability to carry life, and she always had been. Labor started early in the morning, before sunrise, when the world was still quiet. Zoe woke to a sharp tightening across her stomach. At first she thought it was another false alarm, but the next wave came faster, stronger, louder inside her body. "Mama," she called out, breath hitching. Her mother entered the room instantly, sensing the shift before Zoe could explain. "It's time?" Zoe nodded through clenched teeth. The drive to the hospital felt unreal, red lights flashing past, the hum of the tires on the road, her mother's voice soothing her from the front seat. "You're strong, baby. You were made for this." The nurses rushed Zoe into a delivery room, and everything moved quickly after that. Hours blurred, voices layered over one another. Instructions, encouragement, the steady beeping of machines, then the first cry, high, soft, clear. "Carrie," followed moments later by a louder, more determined wail. "Tara," Zoe broke. She cried so hard she could barely see. Her hands trembled as the nurses placed the tiny girls against her chest, warm, fragile, miraculous. Carrie's eyes opened just enough to reveal a calm, thoughtful gaze that immediately softened Zoe's heart. Tara flailed her little fists as if she had arrived ready to conquer the world. Zoe laughed through tears. "Of course you're already arguing," she whispered. "I should have known." Her mother stood beside the bed, shoulders shaking with emotion. "Oh, my grandbabies," she choked out. "Look at them. Look at what you brought into this world." Zoe kissed both girls' foreheads. "You two saved me," she whispered. And she meant it, because they didn't just arrive into her life, they pulled her into a life she never thought she'd get to live. The early months felt like stepping into a new universe. Zoe barely slept. Carrie and Tara alternated their needs so perfectly that Zoe often joked they held secret meetings when she wasn't looking. But amid the exhaustion came a steady, deepening sense of purpose. She learned how to feed them at the same time. She learned how to tell their cries apart. She learned that babies somehow multiply laundry without touching any clothes. There were nights she sat in the rocking chair, half asleep, hair messy, shirt stained, humming softly while Tara refused to sleep unless she was held. There were mornings when Carrie's quiet, observational stare softened every tired bone in Zoe's body. Her mother supported her through it all, cooking meals, folding clothes, and whispering encouragement into Zoe's ear whenever she felt overwhelmed. "This is your transformation," her mother would say, "not your burden." And it was true. Motherhood wasn't shrinking Zoe, it was expanding her. Every bottle she prepared, every bath she gave, every late-night whisper into her daughter's tiny ears built a new version of herself. One, stronger, wiser, softer, and more resilient than she had ever imagined. She was becoming her mother's legacy. She was becoming her daughter's foundation. She was becoming the woman she once wished she could be. From the moment Zoe left Michael's house, she never reached out again. Not when she found out she was pregnant, not when she discovered she was carrying twins, not when she went into labor, not when the girls were born. Some decisions weren't made out of anger, they were made out of clarity. She had given every part of herself to a man who couldn't stand beside her when she needed him most. She had begged for partnership only to be met with silence. She had offered love only to be handed doubt in return. So Zoe vowed, "I will give my daughters a life built on peace, not confusion," and peace flourished. Her home was filled with baby giggles, soft lullabies, and steady routine. Not tension, not the emotional coldness she once endured. Michael belonged to a chapter she had already closed. And as she watched her daughters grow from newborns to infants with lively personalities, Zoe knew she made the right decision. Some doors should never reopen. Motherhood didn't just reshape her life, it rebuilt her self-worth. Her confidence returned slowly, like dawn rising after a long night. She saw it when she caught her reflection rocking two babies at once. She saw it when she went back to work and colleagues noticed her glow. She saw it when strangers complimented her patience and strength. But most importantly, she felt it. That internal shift, that quiet rise, that reclaiming of her identity. Michael's absence no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like space, space for healing, space for growth, space for joy. One evening, after the twins were finally asleep, Zoe sat on the couch holding a mug of warm tea. Her mother joined her, exhaustion in her eyes but pride in her smile. "You doing good, baby," her mother said. "Better than good," Zoe exhaled softly. "Some days I feel strong, some days I just feel tired." "Strength isn't about never getting tired," her mother replied. "It's about showing up anyway. And you show up every day." Zoe looked at her daughters' sleeping forms on the baby monitor, two little miracles tucked into their tiny beds. She whispered, mostly to herself, "I'm becoming someone I'm proud of." And she was. Motherhood didn't just transform her life, it transformed her spirit. It reclaimed her joy, it restored her identity, it rebuilt her future, and it quietly prepared her for the day she would walk into a room at a corporate reunion, and her past would come face to face with the miracles he never knew existed. Raising twins was not a gentle journey. It was lively, unpredictable, chaotic, beautiful, and real. Zoe learned quickly that motherhood wasn't a straight line. It didn't move from one neat milestone to the next. It zigzagged, looped, rose, fell, and demanded everything from her, yet gave her twice as much in return. Carrie and Tara became her world, and in shaping their world, Zoe discovered how deeply she could transform her own. By the time the girls turned one, their personalities had fully introduced themselves. Carrie was observant and thoughtful, always studying a room before choosing where she wanted to be. She held onto Zoe's leg during new situations, peeking out with wide eyes before slowly stepping forward. Tara was bold from the start, charging toward life with no hesitation. She climbed furniture before she knew how to climb down. She tried to run before she mastered walking. She spoke louder, moved faster, and embraced every moment, like her existence relied on enthusiasm. Their differences balanced each other perfectly. Where one was careful, the other was fearless. Where one listened first, the other acted first. Where one needed reassurance, the other needed freedom. Zoe watched them grow with a mixture of amusement, exhaustion, and profound wonder. Every day brought something new. Cheerios spilled across the living room carpet, matching outfits ruined by juice stains, tiny shoes hiding in random cupboards, toys in every corner of the apartment, laughter echoing like music after long days. Some nights, Zoe lay in bed wondering how she managed to keep up. Other nights, she smiled softly at the ceiling, grateful that life had given her the one thing she never expected to have, a family of her own. The same family Michael once made her feel incapable of building. When the twins were 3, Zoe returned to work with more confidence than she had ever known. At the logistics company, she was no longer the woman struggling under the emotional weight of a failing marriage. She was a mother of 2, steady and self-assured, someone whose presence carried quiet authority. Her coworkers noticed. "Zoe, you seem different, stronger," one colleague remarked. Zoe smiled lightly. Life taught me a few lessons. Her performance improved drastically. She handled difficult clients with patience she had sharpened through early morning tantrums. She organized complex schedules with the same precision she used to manage nap times and feeding routines. She communicated clearly, firmly, kindly, the way she spoke to the twins when guiding their behavior. Her boss began relying on her more often. "You've become one of the most dependable people here," he said during a quarterly review. "We'd like to expand your responsibilities." And with expanded responsibilities came expanded pay. Zoe celebrated by buying the twins new sneakers they had been eyeing at the store. When she placed the boxes in front of them, Tara squealed, "Mommy, we can run faster now." Carrie whispered, "Thank you." and hugged Zoe's waist. Zoe's heart swelled. Their joy was her reward. Zoe had always been careful with money. Growing up in Southeast Texas taught her the value of every dollar. Now, with 2 children and a stronger salary, she planned with even more intention. She created a savings system. 1 account for emergencies, 1 for the twins' future, 1 for household expenses, 1 for personal goals. Over time, those accounts grew. Slowly at first, then more steadily as her promotions increased her income. After 2 years of careful budgeting, Zoe moved her family into a larger apartment, still modest but brighter, roomier, and in a safer neighborhood with a small playground the twins adored. Her mother cried when she saw it. "Zoe, look at you," she whispered, touching the freshly painted living room wall. "You built this." Zoe swallowed her own tears. "We built it." Her mother shook her head gently. "You carried more than you ever should have, and look how far you came." Zoe didn't respond, not because she disagreed, but because acknowledging her own strength felt powerful in a way she wasn't used to yet. For years, Zoe lived without a single glimpse of Michael. She didn't check social media. She didn't allow his memory any space in her daily life. But life, in its unpredictable rhythm, sometimes lets the past brush against the present in small, accidental ways. The first mention came at the grocery store. Zoe was comparing cereal prices while Carrie and Tara argued about which cartoon character looked friendlier on the box. A familiar voice called her name. "Zoe? Wow, long time." It was an old co-worker from earlier years, one who had known Zoe during her marriage. They exchanged warm greetings. The woman glanced at the twins, eyes widening in pleasant surprise. "They're beautiful," she said. "They look just like you." Zoe smiled. "Thank you." The woman hesitated before adding, "I heard, Michael remarried pretty fast." Zoe nodded politely. "I heard that too." The woman lowered her voice. "He shows off his new family a lot. Talks about expecting his first child like it's the greatest thing that ever happened." Zoe's hand stilled on the cereal box. First child. He calls it his first child. Her heart didn't twist, not anymore, but something firm and clear settled inside her. She didn't speak poorly of him. She didn't indulge in bitterness. She simply said, "Life takes people where they choose to go." The woman nodded knowingly. "Well, looks like your life took you somewhere better." Zoe thanked her and continued shopping, the twins tugging on her arms. She felt no pain over the revelation, only reassurance that her path had unfolded exactly as it needed to. A few months later, at work, her boss casually mentioned that the upcoming regional corporate reunion was expected to have a big turnout, including managers, partners, and former employees. He added, "I heard Michael's division plans to attend this year." Zoe paused mid-keystroke. She didn't flinch. She didn't freeze. She simply breathed out slowly. Years had passed since she left him. Years filled with growth, peace, love, and purpose. Her heart no longer belonged to that painful chapter. Still, it was strange hearing his name spoken aloud after so much silence. That night she sat with her mother on the couch, the twins asleep in their beds. "Mama," Zoe said quietly, "there's a chance I may see him." Her mother looked at her with steady eyes. "How do you feel about that?" Zoe thought for a long moment. "Not scared," she said finally. "Not angry, just ready." Her mother nodded. "Because you're not the same woman who left him." Zoe smiled gently. "No, I'm not." As the reunion date approached, Zoe felt no dread. Instead, she felt a calm resolve. She chose a maroon dress that complemented her skin tone, a dress that made her feel grounded, capable, and whole. She braided her hair neatly, applied light makeup, and studied her reflection in the mirror. She saw strength. She saw growth. She saw the mother she had become, and the woman she always wanted to be. Her mother stood behind her, tears gathering in her eyes. "Baby, you look like you're ready to walk into any room and own it." Zoe exhaled softly. "Maybe I am." She didn't prepare for confrontation. She didn't plan clever words. She didn't rehearse explanations. Because the reunion wasn't about Michael. She gathered her purse, kissed her sleeping daughters' foreheads, and whispered, "Mommy will be back soon." As she stepped outside, the warm Texas air wrapped around her, gentle, steady, like a reminder of how far she'd come. She had survived heartbreak. She had risen through motherhood. She had rebuilt her world piece by piece. And now, she was ready to step into the next chapter, completely unaware that the past she had outgrown was waiting inside that reunion hall, about to collide with the life she built, and reveal the truth he never expected to face. The event hall sat in the center of Houston, a polished corporate venue with glass-paneled walls that reflected the warm late-afternoon sunlight. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with conversations, clusters of employees exchanging updates, managers shaking hands, old coworkers laughing like no time had passed at all. The air carried that familiar blend of ambition, networking energy, and polite performance that always came with large corporate gatherings. Zoe stepped into that environment with the calm confidence of a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece. Her maroon dress fit her perfectly, not for attention, but for grounding. Every step she took across the polished floor reminded her of how far she had come from the confused, heartbroken woman she once was. She moved with an elegance shaped by survival, motherhood, and growth. As she made her way deeper into the room, several familiar faces lit up at the sight of her. "Wow, motherhood suits you. You're glowing." She accepted each compliment with warmth, but not arrogance. She didn't rush. She didn't shrink. She existed fully in her space, calm, self-assured, present. Still, she could feel something subtle, a shift, a ripple, almost like a quiet stirring beneath the usual corporate chatter. She realized why only when she reached the center walkway. Across the room, near one of the tall cocktail tables, stood Michael, her ex-husband. His posture was perfectly straight, his suit crisp, his smile wide enough to show confidence, perhaps too much of it. He held a drink in one hand while resting his other hand on the belly of the woman beside him, his wife. A blonde woman wearing a soft cream-colored dress, her rounded stomach proudly on display. By the way she carried herself, head slightly lifted, polite smile plastered on, she looked accustomed to attention, maybe even hungry for it. Zoe didn't stare. She simply observed, the same way she had learned to observe her daughter's emotions without reacting too quickly. Michael was in the middle of a circle of admirers. Former coworkers, team members, even a few upper-level managers stood around him, listening intently as he spoke with enthusiasm. "We're expecting in just a few months," he said, rubbing his wife's belly with exaggerated tenderness. "Our first baby." People clapped. Someone joked about sleepless nights. Another praised him for how excited he seemed. Zoe felt nothing sharp inside her. No jealousy, no longing, no ache, just a quiet acceptance. This was the life Michael built after their divorce, the life he chose, the life he celebrated. But the details were telling. First baby, he called it his first. Zoe exhaled slowly through her nose, steady and grounded. Her body didn't react the way it once would have. No tightening of the chest, no sting behind the eyes. She simply let the truth pass through her like a breath she no longer needed to hold. She turned away. She didn't come here for him. She came for her career, her confidence, her future. She mingled with colleagues, sipped water, and found a spot near a decorative plant arrangement that offered a clear view of the room without placing her in the center of it. But the room had other plans, because even without trying, Zoe drew attention, not because of drama, because she glowed. Her presence carried something different, calm but powerful, reserved but radiant. People gravitated toward her naturally, complimenting her dress, her hair, her renewed confidence. Every conversation she held felt genuine, free of the tension she once carried into spaces like these. But the real shift began when Michael finally noticed her. It happened by accident. He was laughing at something a coworker said, turning slightly as if to gesture at someone, and then he saw her. His smile paused. His posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Recognition flashed across his face first, then something closer to discomfort. Zoe held his gaze with a polite nod, nothing more. Michael's wife followed his line of sight. Her eyes settled on Zoe with curiosity. Nothing hostile, just the subtle skepticism of someone trying to place a familiar name to a now visible face. "Oh," the wife said softly. "That must be—" Michael cut her off with a quick, quiet, "Yeah, that's Zoe." His voice didn't carry far, but it carried enough emotion to betray him. His wife raised her eyebrows slightly. "She's different than I expected." Zoe didn't hear this part, but the shift in Michael's expression was loud enough on its own. He looked stunned. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just shaken in a way he couldn't hide. Zoe continued her conversation with a coworker, unaware of the building tension behind her. She didn't come here to seek reactions, but reactions found her naturally. Her presence alone disrupted something Michael thought he had neatly closed. But fate wasn't done yet, not even close. Zoe hadn't planned for her daughters to come inside the venue at all. Her mother had agreed to watch them for the evening, and Zoe fully intended to return home to them once the event wrapped up. But the twins, Carrie with her thoughtful curiosity, Tara with her fearless excitement, had insisted on riding along with their grandmother, just to see Mommy's work building. Her mother parked outside the event hall, planning to wait until Zoe texted that she was wrapping up. That was the intention. But Tara, in all her spirited determination, unbuckled her seatbelt the moment her grandmother opened the car door. The second her feet hit the ground, she took off running toward the entrance. "Mommy!" she shouted, her little voice carrying more power than her size suggested. Carrie followed right behind her, but with calmer steps, scanning the space with quiet awareness before committing fully to the sprint. Their grandmother tried to stop them. "Carrie, Tara, wait for me." But they were already inside. Zoe was mid-conversation when she heard it. "Mommy!" She turned, and everything inside her softened instantly. There they were, her daughters, barreling toward her with the unfiltered joy only small children possess. She bent down just in time for them to crash into her arms. Carrie wrapped her tiny arms around Zoe's neck. Tara practically climbed onto her lap, squeezing tight. "Mommy, we came, we wanted juice. We saw a big window. Grandma's coming, but she walks slow." The pure innocence of their voices echoed across the hall. And that was the moment the room collectively shifted. Not slowly, not quietly, immediately. Silence spread like a wave, not the forbidden word, just genuine organic quiet. Because everyone turned to look, two sets of eyes and smiles unmistakably connected to Zoe. And unmistakably connected to someone else. People murmured under their breath, exchanging looks. Zoe kissed each girl on the cheek without noticing the shock ripple through the crowd. She lifted Carrie, held Tara's hand, and stood up just as her mother caught up, apologizing between breaths. "I tried to hold them, baby. They move like lightning." Zoe laughed softly. "It's okay, Mama. They're fine." But the room wasn't fine. The room was processing. The whispers grew. Faces turned. People glanced from the twins to Zoe, then slowly, almost involuntarily, to Michael. And Michael looked like the ground beneath him shifted. His grip tightened around his drink. His shoulders stiffened. His face drained just enough color to reveal what he truly felt. Recognition, realization, fear, guilt. His wife stared confused, scanning every feature of the girls' faces. Zoe didn't notice the full intensity of the reaction yet. She held her daughters close, brushing Tara's hair back from her face. But she did notice one thing. Michael staring, unblinking, breathing shallowly, like someone piecing together something impossible. Zoe met his eyes for a brief moment, calm, steady, unbothered. No malice, no bitterness, just truth. That was all it took to begin the collision. The reunion had officially turned into something else, something unplanned, undeniable, and unavoidable. And the whispers were only the first tremors. What came next would shake the room to its core. The reunion hall, once filled with casual conversations and harmless laughter, now felt suspended in a strange, heavy quiet. No one announced it, no one coordinated it, but the sight of Zoe holding two children who carried pieces of Michael's face, had frozen the room without a single word spoken. Zoe stood steady, adjusting the hem of Carrie's dress as Tara clung to her leg, whispering something excited about the chandeliers. Her mother hovered beside her, still catching her breath, offering a soft smile to anyone whose eyes lingered too long. But those lingering eyes weren't just curious. They were wide, startled, calculating. The whispers started low. "Those girls, is that even possible?" She never said a word. Wait, weren't they divorced 4 years ago? The puzzle pieces assembled themselves in real time, right there in the minds of everyone watching. Michael stood unmoving, caught between disbelief and a dawning understanding that tightened around his chest like a tightening fist. His wife touched his arm gently, sensing the change in him. "Michael," she whispered, "are you okay?" He didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked on Zoe, then on the twins, then back on Zoe. Finally, with a stiff swallow, he managed, I need a second." He stepped away from his conversation circle and took a few hesitant steps closer, not too close, but enough that his expression became undeniably visible to everyone. Zoe noticed him approaching before he even reached her side of the room. She straightened her spine, smoothing Tara's back with a slow, reassuring motion. She carried no shame, no hesitation. Her daughters were her pride, her joy, her miracle. But she also knew what this moment meant. The truth she never chased had chased her. Michael stood about 3 feet away, not invading her space, but completely stripped of the confidence he had flaunted just minutes earlier. He didn't know how to begin. He didn't know what he was allowed to ask, but the words escaped anyway. "Are they?" His voice cracked with a mix of shock, fear, and disbelief he wasn't ready to admit. "Zoe, are they?" He couldn't finish the sentence. Zoe didn't give him an answer yet, not because she wanted to punish him, but because Carrie tugged her sleeve at that exact moment. "Mommy, can we get juice now?" the little girl asked softly. Zoe smiled at her. "In a minute, baby." She kissed her forehead before placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then she looked up at Michael. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't triumphant. It was simply real. "What exactly are you asking me, Michael?" His throat tightened. He glanced at each girl, Carrie with her observant eyes, Tara with her expressive features. Everything about them reflected pieces of him, pieces he never knew he left behind. "How old are they?" he finally asked. His voice was small, quieter than Zoe had ever heard it. The entire room leaned in. It was the first public crack in the narrative he had proudly carried for years. Zoe's chin lifted slightly, not in challenge but in clarity. She answered without hesitation. 4. A wave of reaction swept through the hall. Audible gasps, sharply drawn breaths, pens dropped, hands covering mouths, shoulders turning toward one another. 4. The numbers sat in the air like a strike of thunder. Michael's wife stiffened instantly. "But we're expecting your first—" Her voice broke off, because the math was undeniable. Michael's face had drained so completely that the tension around his eyes looked almost painful. His wife stepped back slightly, her hand still on her stomach as her gaze flicked between the twins and her husband. The truth shouted louder than anyone speaking. Michael had children, real children, 4 years old, before his new marriage, before all the stories he told, before all the pity given to him. The silence remained until Zoe, sensing the pressure building uncomfortably, gently redirected the twins so they stood slightly behind her. She wasn't hiding them. She was shielding them. Michael cleared his throat, attempting to gather himself. "Zoe, no one ever said anything. I never knew. You never—" Zoe's mother stepped forward before Zoe could reply, meeting Michael with a steady gaze that held years of quiet fury. "Son, you knew enough," she said softly. Not yelling, not dramatic, just firm. "You left that girl broken. You let your people speak down to her, speak over her, judge her. She told you she didn't feel right, and you didn't want to hear it." Michael swallowed, shame rolling visibly through his features, but he still shook his head weakly. "I didn't know she was pregnant." Zoe lifted her hand slightly, an unspoken gesture asking for room to speak. Her mother stepped back, letting her daughter take the lead. "No, you didn't know," Zoe said calmly. "I didn't know either. Not until after the papers were signed." Another stir swept across the room, this time filled with disbelief mixed with sympathy. Zoe continued, her voice steady, not trembling. "I was grieving our marriage. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping right. I thought I was sick from stress. I went to the doctor alone." Her eyes softened when she glanced at her daughters, and there they were, 2 heartbeats, 2 lives, 2 miracles you never looked for. Michael's eyes brimmed with something, regret, fear, maybe both. "And you didn't tell me?" The question wasn't angry. It was fragile. Zoe held his gaze unwavering. "I tried to tell your family," she said, "but they didn't want to hear anything from me. They were too busy deciding who I was, what I wasn't, what I couldn't do. They shut every door before I even knocked." The room erupted into yet another whisper storm. Michael's wife's expression shifted, not defensive, not jealous, but stunned, because she realized she had been celebrating a story that didn't belong to her. One that wasn't whole, one that wasn't true. And Michael— He looked at the twins again, really looked. Carrie peeked out cautiously from behind Zoe, her small hand gripping her mother's dress. Tara, bold as ever, looked directly back at him with wide, curious eyes. There was no anger in their faces, no fear. Michael's voice trembled when he finally spoke again. Can I? He couldn't finish that sentence either. Zoe didn't answer, because this wasn't a question that could be answered in a public room, under hundreds of watchful eyes, in the middle of a professional reunion. Instead, she offered a gentle but firm boundary. "Michael, this isn't the moment." Her words didn't slice, they didn't humiliate, they protected everyone, especially her daughters. Because the truth of the twins wasn't a headline, it wasn't gossip, it wasn't entertainment, it was her life, their life, and perhaps most painfully for Michael, it was the life he was never part of. People around the room exchanged glances heavy with realization. Some shook their heads in quiet disapproval, others looked at Michael with stark disappointment. But one truth lingered above all others. The narrative Michael had built, of a woman who couldn't have children, of a clean break, of a fresh start, had shattered in an instant. And the room now knew the truth. Zoe hadn't failed him, he had failed her, and the cost of that failure stood right in front of him, 2 daughters he never knew existed. The collision had begun, but the emotional reckoning was still ahead. The room still hummed with tension long after Zoe's gentle words ended the first collision. Her daughters clung quietly to her, Carrie holding her hand with a soft grip, Tara resting her cheek against Zoe's hip. The twins didn't fully understand what was happening, but even they sensed the unusually heavy pause around them. Michael stood frozen, his face a map of unraveling emotions, regret tugging one way, shock pulling the other, and a dawning realization anchoring itself directly in the center of his chest. His wife, visibly unsettled, stared from Zoe to the twins and back to her husband, struggling to piece together what all of it meant for the life she thought she understood. People around the hall whispered, shifting their weight, exchanging glances, pretending not to stare while still very much staring. The whispers carried more weight now, not just surprise, but an evolving understanding of how deeply Zoe had suffered in silence. Zoe knew the room needed air, space, clarity, but she also knew that she owed her daughter's protection more than anything. She reached down and stroked Tara's back slowly, breathing steady, grounded, unshaken. Michael finally stepped forward with a tentative hesitation, raising his hand slightly, not touching, not demanding, just signaling that he needed to speak. "Zoe, please," he began, voice rough with emotion. "Can we talk? Somewhere quieter?" Zoe met his eyes with calm steel. "Michael," she said, still gentle but immovable, "this is not a private moment. You asked a public question. You reacted publicly. And right now, my daughters are here. Everything I say will stay respectful, but it will stay honest." He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. He understood. He had no right to expect her to shield him after the truth he spent years avoiding finally surfaced. His wife stepped closer, touching his arm. "Michael, I don't understand. You told me she couldn't—" Zoe raised her hand, halting the sentence before it inflicted more harm than was necessary. "I never said I couldn't carry a child," Zoe replied. "Your family decided that. They decided everything about me without ever asking who I was." Michael's shoulders curled inward. His voice trembled. "Zoe, I swear, I didn't know they said those things. I didn't know what they were doing behind the scenes. I didn't know you were—" "Hurting?" Zoe asked softly. "Breaking? Losing myself piece by piece?" She shook her head, not in anger but in recognition of a truth she once wished he had seen. "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't listen. You didn't look at me long enough to see the pain." He flinched. The crowd around them shifted again. Closer, quieter, listening without daring to interrupt. Zoe continued, her voice steady like someone who had rehearsed this conversation countless times in the privacy of her own mind, but never imagined it happening in public. "I begged for us to slow down," she said. "I told you I felt something was wrong, and your response was to say your family was just trying to help. But they weren't helping, Michael. They were hurting me, and you let it happen." Michael's jaw tightened with the grief of hindsight. "I didn't realize—" "No, you didn't," she said, not harshly but truthfully. "And I spent years trying to convince myself that maybe I misunderstood, maybe I was too sensitive, maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was that I was drowning, and you walked away before I ever learned how to breathe again." Her words weren't vindictive. They were lived, earned, proven. Michael blinked rapidly, moisture gathering at the corners of his eyes. His voice cracked when he whispered, I thought you didn't want children. You never said." Zoe's mother stepped forward slightly, but Zoe gave a gentle nod, signaling she could handle this. "Michael," Zoe said softly, "I didn't talk about children because every time I tried, your family cut me down. They told you I was wasting your time. They told me I wasn't enough. You didn't stop them, and eventually, I stopped trying." This time, Michael's wife let out a small gasp, not theatrical, but real. She looked at her husband with new eyes, eyes that questioned everything he had ever told her about his past marriage. Michael looked away, shame folding around his expression like a shadow. "I didn't know. Zoe, I swear I didn't know they treated you like that." Zoe nodded. "I believe you didn't know everything, but you knew enough, and you chose not to look deeper." There was a long pause, deep, quiet, painful. Then Zoe continued, her tone shifting from recounting to reckoning. "The day we divorced," she said, "I wasn't angry at you. I was empty. I felt like a shell. And when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't have the strength to fight your family again. I didn't have the strength to call and risk being ignored again. I just chose peace." Michael finally met her gaze with a vulnerability so raw it silenced even the whispers. "They're mine," he said softly, eyes flicking toward the twins. "I can see it. I know it. They look like—" He cut himself off before speaking a name that would hurt the girls. Zoe didn't answer. She didn't need to. The room already knew. His wife's breath caught. "Michael, all this time, you said—" Her voice tangled with betrayal and confusion. She wasn't angry at the twins or Zoe. She was angry at being given a fractured story, a story she built her life around. Michael reached for her shoulder, but she stepped back slightly, not out of rejection, but shock. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Why didn't you say there was even a chance?" "I didn't know," he insisted weakly. "I didn't—" Zoe stepped in, her voice gentle but authoritative. "He didn't know because he believed what everyone told him. He believed a narrative that painted me as the problem. and he never once questioned whether I was suffering in silence. Michael faced her again, eyes red, voice barely audible. "Zoe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Zoe nodded slowly. "I'm not here for apologies," she said. "I'm here because I built a life without bitterness. My daughters know love. They know warmth. They know safety. They know who I am, not who anyone else declared me to be." Her words weren't meant to punish him. They were meant to free her. "And Michael," she added, "you will not rewrite the story now that the truth is visible. Not for attention, not for sympathy, and not to soothe your guilt." He nodded, a tear finally slipping free. "I understand." Zoe took a breath, steady and grounding. "This moment is not for you," she continued. "It's not for the crowd. It's not even for me. It's for them." She motioned to Carrie and Tara, who watched the adults with wide, curious eyes, sensing the weight without absorbing the pain. "My daughters will always come first. Their hearts, their future, their peace. Any conversation about them will happen privately and respectfully. Not here. Not like this." Michael swallowed hard. Can I at least say hello?" Zoe paused. Her heart tightened, not from past hurt, but from the responsibility of motherhood. She crouched down to eye level with her daughters. "Carrie, Tara," she said gently, "this is someone Mommy used to know from work." The girls looked up at Michael curiously. He crouched too, careful not to get too close, careful not to impose. "Hi," he said softly, his voice trembled. You're both very bright, and very brave." Tara grinned instantly. Carrie gave a small, shy smile. Zoe allowed the moment, short, controlled, safe. Then she rose. "Michael," she said, "that's enough for today." He nodded, understanding he wasn't owed more. Zoe gathered her daughter's hands, ready to walk away. But the entire room had already seen the truth of the twins, the truth of the marriage, the truth of the pain, the truth of the strength. Zoe wasn't just a woman who survived, she was a woman who rose. And Michael realized too late that he had lost far more than he ever understood. The emotional reckoning had only just begun. The moment Zoe told Michael, "That's enough for today," the subtle equilibrium of the reunion shattered. He stood frozen in place as she gently gathered Carrie and Tara's hands, preparing to guide them toward the exit with her mother beside her. The room remained completely still, every whisper tucked behind parted lips, waiting to see what would happen next. But Michael couldn't let her walk away. Not yet. Not before he really tried, to correct a mistake that had lived 4 years too long. He took a shaky step forward. "Zoe." "Wait." His voice cracked, not loud, not commanding, but desperate. The sound of a man who finally realized the gravity of what he had lost and what had never belonged to him in the first place. Zoe paused, but she didn't turn around immediately. She kneeled beside Tara to fix the small twist in her dress strap, brushed a curl behind Carrie's ear, and only after her daughters were settled did she straighten slowly and face him again. "What is it, Michael?" He swallowed hard. The room's attention pressed against him like weight. His wife hovered a few feet behind him, hands resting protectively over her stomach, uncertainty clouding her expression. Michael inhaled deeply, forcing the words through the tightness in his chest. "I want to be part of their lives." The statement rippled through the room, sharp, unexpected, high stakes. Zoe didn't respond right away. She simply looked at him, her expression unreadable, neither soft nor harsh. "Just steady," he continued, the words tumbling out faster, fueled by panic he didn't bother hiding. "I know I made mistakes. I know I didn't see what I should have seen. I know I let my family control the narrative. I know I didn't protect you, or them. But I don't want to lose more time. I want a chance to know them. A chance to—" Zoe raised her hand gently, stopping him. "Michael," she said, voice low but powerful, "slow down." He nodded, breath unstable, guilt thickening the air around him. Zoe shifted her weight, placing herself slightly in front of her daughters, not as a barrier, but as a leader in this moment. "What exactly do you think being in their lives means?" Michael blinked, thrown by the question. I'd like to spend time with them, get to know them, support them, be their father." The word father hit the room like a dropped weight. Even his wife stiffened at the choice of vocabulary. Zoe held his gaze unwavering. "You want to be their father," she repeated, not mocking, not condemning, just clarifying. "Yes," he whispered, "if you'll allow it." Her expression changed, not softening, but sharpening with a clarity he wasn't prepared for. "Michael," she said slowly, "these girls already have stability. They already have love. They already have a home. They don't need someone stepping in because he's drowning in guilt. They need consistency. They need understanding. They need patience. He opened his mouth to respond, but she didn't let him. And they need protection from anyone whose involvement might shake their world before it strengthens it. His head dropped slightly, absorbing the truth. She stepped closer, not confrontational, but cautious. You tell me you want to be part of their lives, but answer me honestly. Are you doing this out of love, or are you doing this because you're embarrassed the truth came out in a room full of people you wanted to impress? Michael's breath caught. Her words were direct, sharp, but not wrong. He shook his head slowly. Zoe, it's not about embarrassment. It's about regret. It's about waking up to what I failed to see. It's about understanding that I lost something precious, and now I want to try. I want to do better. Zoe crossed her arms, not in defensiveness, but in assessment. I hear what you're saying, she replied. But wanting to fix something doesn't mean you're ready for the responsibility that comes with it. And wanting to undo harm doesn't mean you automatically get access to the people affected by it. He flinched. Carrie peeked up at Zoe, sensing tension. Tara hugged Zoe's leg tighter. Zoe rested a hand on their shoulders and continued. You weren't there when I carried them. You weren't there for the first time they laughed, or when they took their first steps, or when they were sick, or when they needed someone at night. You weren't there to shape them. You weren't there to protect them. You weren't there for any moment that built the foundation they have today. Michael's eyes filled with moisture again. I know, he whispered, and that's why I want to start now. Zoe breathed out slowly, grounding herself. You don't get to start with expectations. He straightened slightly, confused. What does that mean? It means, Zoe said carefully, if you want to be part of their lives, you'll have to earn the right, slowly, respectfully, and without ego. The words hung in the air, powerful enough to pull every whisper into silence. She continued, you don't get to demand time. You don't get to rewrite the past. You don't get to walk in as if you've always been here. You don't get to claim a title you didn't uphold. Her voice softened slightly, not out of pity but out of truth. You'll have to start from the outside and work your way in, if you choose to try at all. His breathing hitched and his shoulders sagged. The reality of her words weighed heavily on him. But, she added, any step forward will be on my terms. And theirs, not yours. The crowd exchanged glances, some approving, some sympathetic, all deeply invested. Michael nodded slowly, devastation settling in like a shadow. I'll do whatever it takes, he said quietly. Anything you ask. Zoe studied him carefully. I need more than words, Michael, she replied. I need consistency. I need proof you can show up without falling apart. I need proof you can respect boundaries instead of trying to force closeness because of guilt. He swallowed hard, recognizing the magnitude of what she was saying. I'll prove it, he whispered. I'll do better. I'll do whatever you need. But Zoe saw something behind his eyes, a fear not of losing the twins but of confronting himself. And that was when she understood. Michael wasn't just asking for access, he was breaking down, right here. His wife watched him with shock, hurt, and confusion swirling together. Zoe took a quiet breath. Michael, she said softly, you're not ready, not yet, and that's okay. But don't ask for what you can't carry. These girls deserve your best, not your guilt. He covered his face with one hand, tears escaping despite his attempt to hold them back. For the first time since the reunion began, he looked defeated. Not because Zoe rejected him, but because she spoke to the truth he had never confronted. He was not the man he needed to be. Not then, not now, not yet. His emotional rock bottom had arrived. There was no anger, no shouting, no dramatic gestures, just the quiet collapse of a man whose choices finally caught up with him. And Zoe stood firm, for her daughters, for herself, for the life she rebuilt without him. The consequences had arrived, but clarity had arrived with them. For a long, quiet moment after Michael broke down, the reunion hall remained completely still. Not a single person moved toward him. Not a single voice rose to interrupt. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning felt distant compared to the raw emotion hanging in the air. Zoe stood calm and steady, one hand resting gently on each daughter's shoulder. Her mother stood beside her like a silent pillar of support, the kind only a seasoned woman of resilience could offer. This crossroads, this moment where truth, regret, and consequence collided, was one Zoe once feared she would never survive. But here she was, standing tall in the exact place that once broke her heart, now leaving it whole. She inhaled once, slow and controlled, then lowered her gaze to her daughters. Ready to go, my loves? She asked softly. Carrie nodded, her curls bouncing gently. Tara squeezed Zoe's leg, always the more spirited of the two. Can we still get juice? Tara whispered hopefully. Zoe smiled despite the tension around her. Of course, baby. Juice and maybe a little snack before we go home. The twins brightened immediately. Innocence, blessedly untouched by adult complications, wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Zoe then lifted her gaze to Michael one final time. He was still standing there, eyes red, chest rising and falling unevenly, holding emotions he had never allowed himself to feel before now. His wife hovered behind him, quiet and wounded by truths she didn't even know existed until moments ago. Zoe's voice was gentle but unmoving. "Michael, take some time. Think before you act. When you're ready to have a respectful conversation, one that's about them, not you, you can reach out." They were a boundary, clear, necessary, and steady. Michael nodded slowly, still unable to speak. Zoe turned away with intention, her shoulders back, her posture strong, her steps quiet but decisive. She didn't rush. She didn't apologize for leaving. She didn't shrink under the weight of watchful eyes. She simply walked forward with the peace of someone who knew her worth. As she moved through the crowd, people parted for her, not out of pity but out of respect. The whispering had softened now, not fueled by shock anymore, but by admiration. Several employees who once worked with her watched her pass with expressions that mixed regret for how she had been misjudged and gratitude for the example she now set. Zoe didn't seek validation, but the energy had shifted entirely. Someone murmured softly. She handled that with more grace than anyone else here could have. Another added, she didn't raise her voice once. She didn't embarrass him. She protected those girls every second. A third whispered, that woman is strength. Zoe's mother smiled quietly to herself at the overheard comments, knowing they were true long before anyone else acknowledged them. As they neared the exit, Carrie tugged gently on Zoe's hand. "Mommy, why was that man sad?" she asked, her voice small and curious. Zoe breathed out through her nose, steady and thoughtful. She crouched down to meet both girls at eye level. This was the moment she prepared for, the moment she would not let be taken from her. "Sometimes," she began softly, brushing a curl away from Carrie's forehead, "grown-ups make choices they don't fully understand until later. And when the truth shows up, it makes them feel a lot of things at the same time. That can make them look sad." Carrie nodded, processing with quiet maturity. Tara, meanwhile, tilted her head. "Is he gonna cry forever?" Zoe let out a small laugh. "No, baby. He just needs time to understand his feelings. Like when we don't want to share but then we feel bad after?" Tara asked. "Exactly like that," Zoe replied warmly. "Except grown-up feelings are bigger and take longer to sort out." That explanation satisfied him, and Zoe stood again, smoothing her dress. The twins walked ahead with bouncing steps, excited for juice and snacks, their spirits entirely unaffected by the heavy adult moment they walked away from. As Zoe reached the last row of tables near the exit, two former co-workers stopped her briefly. Politely, cautiously, respectfully. "Zoe," one woman said quietly, her voice filled with sincerity, "you were incredible back there, truly. Not many people could handle a moment like that with such calm." Zoe offered a soft smile. "Thank you. My girls come first. That's all that matters." The second co-worker nodded. "You deserve peace, and whatever comes next, you handled today beautifully." Zoe nodded politely and continued forward. She appreciated their words, not because she needed validation, but because this time, people were finally seeing her for who she was, not for the stories told about her. Her mother caught up beside her as they walked toward the exit doors. "You okay, baby?" her mother asked gently. Zoe didn't hesitate. "I am," and she meant it. "I'm proud of you," her mother added. "You stood firm. You didn't let anger speak for you." Zoe squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm proud too. Not of what happened, but of how far I've come." They stepped into the hallway leading out of the event center. A long corridor washed in soft lighting. The tension of the reunion room felt distant here, like something she had walked out of and left behind entirely. Carrie and Tara skipped slightly ahead, giggling as they tried to hold hands and walk in perfect sync. Their laughter echoed through the corridor, lifting Zoe's heart. As they slowed near the door leading outside, Tara tugged at Zoe again. "Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart. Are you sad?" Zoe paused, considering her answer carefully. Then she crouched down once more. "No, baby, I'm not sad. Not today. Today reminded me how strong we are, how much love we have, and how far we've come." Tara smiled wide. "We're super strong." "Yes," Zoe replied with a warm laugh. "We are." They stepped outside into the early evening air. The sky was painted with tones of fading sunlight, warm and gentle, not dramatic, just real, just honest. Exactly how Zoe preferred her life now. She glanced once over her shoulder, not out of longing, but out of awareness. Through the glass panes of the event hall, she could still see Michael. He was seated now, elbows on his knees, head bowed as his wife stood beside him with crossed arms and a conflicted stare. Zoe didn't linger. She didn't wait to see what happened next. She didn't need to. Her story had already moved forward. She walked her daughters toward the car with her mother, the three of them talking about juice flavors and bedtime stories. As the door closed behind them, a quiet finality settled over the moment. Zoe had walked away with strength, not anger, not fear, not bitterness, strength. The kind that protects innocence, the kind that refuses to be shaken by a past that no longer has power. She left the reunion not as a wounded woman, but as a whole one. Grace carried her out the door, and clarity carried her forward. The moment Zoe stepped out into the warm Texas air with her daughters and her mother, the energy inside the reunion hall shifted completely. What had once been a lively, networking event now felt heavy, quiet, and painfully reflective. All eyes were no longer on the doorway Zoe exited through. They were on Michael. He stood in the center of the hall, motionless, pale and hollow-eyed, like someone who had just discovered a chapter of his life he didn't know existed. His suit jacket hung open, his tie loosened, and the confidence he carried earlier had drained from him entirely. His wife stood beside him, hands clasped tightly, her composure also shattered. The pride she once displayed was gone. Her eyes searched his face, and the more she studied him, the more troubled her expression became. Finally, she spoke. "Michael, look at me." He didn't lift his head. "Michael," she repeated, not loud but firm. "Look at me." He forced himself to raise his gaze. His eyes were glassy, red at the corners. He looked smaller, as though something inside him had caved in. She exhaled shakily. "You told me your marriage ended because you and Zoe weren't a match. You told me she didn't want the same things. You told me children were impossible with her." Michael winced at the words. She continued, "But none of that was true, was it?" The room went silent again, not out of curiosity now, but out of tense empathy. People knew this wasn't just marital tension. This was the aftermath of truths buried too long. "No," Michael whispered, "it wasn't the whole truth." His wife folded her arms. "Why didn't you tell me you blamed her for something she didn't do? Why didn't you tell me your family pushed her to the edge? Why didn't you tell me she was carrying your children when you walked away?" Michael swallowed hard, overwhelmed. "I didn't know she was pregnant. I swear I didn't. I didn't find out until today. But everything else..." He sighed heavily. "Everything else is my fault." His wife looked away, shaking her head softly. "I don't want to be part of a lie, Michael. I don't want to raise our child in a home where truth comes last." That sentence hit him harder than anything Zoe had said. He reached for her hand instinctively. "I'm not lying now. I'm not hiding anymore. I'll fix this." She pulled her hand away, not cruelly, but with clarity. "Fixing this isn't about Zoe anymore. It's about you." She paused. "It's about the choices you made. Choices that hurt her. Choices that led to today." She didn't yell. She didn't argue. Her tone was steady, like she already understood that this moment was no longer about the reunion, or the twins, or Zoe. It was about the man beside her, finally facing himself. Michael lowered himself into a chair nearby, leaning his elbows on his knees. He felt eyes on him from every corner of the room, but none of the stares bothered him now. His mind was too full. He remembered Zoe sitting on their old sofa, exhausted from tears she never wanted him to see. He remembered the disappointment in her face when his mother made comments she didn't deserve. He remembered the nights Zoe tried to talk to him, and he brushed her pain aside because the truth felt too heavy to confront. He had called himself a good man for years, but a good man takes responsibility. A good man protects the woman he loves. A good man doesn't let his silence destroy someone else's spirit. He wasn't that man, not then. And now the consequences had come home. A coworker approached him hesitantly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Michael, you okay?" He didn't pretend. "No," he whispered. "I'm not." The coworker nodded slowly. "You know, people make mistakes, but facing them is the real test." Michael didn't respond. He couldn't. He was too busy replaying Zoe's final words. "If you want to be in their lives someday, you'll have to earn the right slowly, respectfully, and without ego." He had never been spoken to like that before, with truth delivered without malice, boundaries set without anger. Zoe hadn't tried to punish him. She hadn't tried to humiliate him. She hadn't tried to destroy him. She had simply made it clear that access to her daughters was not something granted through history or biology alone. It had to be earned. A deep ache spread through his chest. He wasn't sure if it was grief, regret, or a mixture of both. His wife took a seat across from him, still guarded but watching him closely. "Michael," she said gently, "what do you want to do now?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. "That's not enough," she replied softly. "Not for me. Not for you. And definitely not for the twins." He lifted his gaze. "I want to be better." "Then start with truth," she said. Michael nodded, wiping the corner of his eye. "The truth is, Zoe deserved so much better than the man I was." His wife leaned back, taking that in. "And who are you now?" That question landed deep. Who was he now? A man who learned fatherhood existed long before he acknowledged it. A man whose past choices had shaped someone else's pain. But maybe, just maybe, a man ready to grow. For the first time in years, he wasn't performing strength. He was facing reality. One of his supervisors approached him gently. "Take a few days," she said. "Clear your mind. Reflect. Don't rush this." Michael nodded, grateful for the grace he didn't deserve but needed. The hall slowly returned to movement, people resuming conversations in lower tones, glancing at him with something between sympathy and caution. His wife stood and touched his shoulder lightly. "We'll talk at home." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't rejection. It was a promise, one that signaled hard conversations ahead, but also possibility. Michael rose to his feet slowly. He looked toward the entrance one last time, even though Zoe was long gone. He whispered softly, to no one in particular, "I'll do better." Whether anyone heard or not didn't matter. What mattered was that, for the first time, he truly meant it. He walked out with his wife beside him, humbled and quiet, carrying the weight of truth, but also the first spark of accountability. This wasn't redemption. This was the beginning of clarity, and the beginning of consequences finally understood. What Zoe didn't see, because she didn't need to, was that Michael left the reunion not as the proud man who walked in, but as someone forced to confront the truth he avoided for years. Truth delayed is still truth delivered, and once delivered, it demands change. Zoe woke before the sun most mornings now, not out of stress, not out of habit, but out of quiet contentment. Life had settled into something steady, warm, and surprisingly gentle. Her days no longer opened with heartbreak or questions she didn't know how to answer. They opened with purpose. The twins were her alarm clock most days, but on this one morning, she beat them to it. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft rustle of the curtains. Her apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. Every piece of furniture was placed with intention. Every corner held something she earned with her own strength. She stretched, letting her muscles ease awake, then pushed herself up and walked into the hall. The twins' bedroom door was cracked open, just enough for her to peek through. Carrie slept on the left side of the bunk bed, neatly tucked under her blanket as if she'd arranged herself for a photograph. Tara slept on the bottom bunk, sprawled diagonally across her mattress with one foot dangling off the side. That contrast alone often made Zoe smile. Carrie's calm and Tara's wildness were a harmonious mix that kept her life fun, unpredictable, and full. Zoe leaned against the doorframe, arms folded softly. For a moment, she simply breathed them in, their innocence, their steady breathing, the comfort of knowing they were safe and loved. There was a time she thought her heart might never feel steady again. Now she couldn't imagine life without this stability. She tiptoed into the kitchen, started a pot of coffee, and set out bowls for cereal. It wasn't a fancy breakfast, but with 2 energetic children to get ready for daycare and her own work schedule to meet, cereal was often the realist's version of a feast. As the coffee brewed, she opened her laptop to check her calendar. Her career had taken an unexpected turn over the past year, and she had grown into responsibilities she once doubted she'd ever reach. Her promotion had made life easier, not luxurious but comfortable. Bills no longer felt like battles. Groceries didn't require mental arithmetic. She even started saving for the twins' future, something she had dreamed of long before motherhood, but never expected to achieve alone. Her phone buzzed with a morning notification, an email from her supervisor, simply thanking her for leading a successful team project. Small things like that mattered more now. Recognition that came not because she impressed anyone by surviving hardship, but because she excelled in her role. As she typed a short reply, she heard soft footsteps behind her. "Mommy!" Carrie's sleepy voice floated into the room. Zoe turned with a gentle smile. "Good morning, baby." Carrie rubbed her eyes, hair sticking up in soft curls. "Tara kicked me," Zoe chuckled. "Did she? On purpose or in her sleep?" "In her sleep." Carrie climbed into a chair at the table. "She sleeps like she's fighting someone." "That sounds accurate." Zoe poured cereal into the bowl. "Eat a little before she wakes up, okay?" As if on cue, a thud echoed from the hallway. Every morning came with a dramatic entrance. She barreled into the kitchen with unmatched enthusiasm. "Mommy, Carrie left me." Carrie walked 20 steps, Zoe teased. "You'll survive." Tara climbed into her seat and leaned over the table dramatically. "Barely." Zoe shook her head fondly. The twins, in all their uniqueness, filled the house with rhythm. Their laughter echoed through each room. Their arguments ended as quickly as they started, and their questions, curious, endless, kept Zoe on her toes. She answered everything from why is the sky blue to how do mothers know stuff, with patience she never knew she possessed. Their childhood wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was safe. It was grounded in love, and that, to Zoe, mattered more than anything. Once the girls were fed and dressed, Carrie in a soft yellow top, Tara in a shirt she'd chosen solely because it had glitter, Zoe drove them to daycare. The ride was filled with chatter about preschool songs, a story Tara made up on the spot about a superhero cat, and Carrie's reminder that she had artwork to finish. After dropping them off, Zoe lingered by the door for a moment. Parents often rushed away, but Zoe liked watching her daughters run into the room, greet their friends, and settle into the day without hesitation. Independence suited them well. She'd raised them to be brave, but not hardened, kind, but not naive. She carried those images with her as she drove to work. Zoe's workplace had changed in subtle but meaningful ways since her promotion. Her co-workers no longer saw her as the quiet woman in the corner who kept her head down. They saw her as a leader, competent, thoughtful, reliable. The energy she walked with had changed too. She didn't shrink herself anymore. She didn't avoid meetings out of fear of being overlooked or dismissed. She took initiative. She offered ideas. She stepped into spaces where she once felt invisible. Motherhood had shifted everything inside her. It hadn't just made her stronger, it made her intentional. Even small interactions at work reflected her growth. Her coworker waved as she entered. "Morning, Zoe. You look refreshed today." "I feel good," Zoe replied, and she meant it. She set her bag down, booted up her computer, and prepared for the day's tasks. No lingering sadness followed her into the office. No memories of being belittled. No shadows from her marriage. Those days felt far away now, not erased, but distant enough to no longer influence her every thought. During lunch, she sat with two colleagues who had become genuine friends. The conversation drifted between work updates, parenting stories, and weekend plans. Zoe laughed freely, the kind of laugh that didn't feel guarded or weighed down. Healing had given her that gift. On the drive home, she picked up the twins, who ran into her arms with the kind of unfiltered joy only children could deliver. "Mommy, we painted today," Tara shouted. Carrie held up her paper quietly. "Mine is a heart, for you." Zoe's chest softened instantly. "Thank you, baby." As they walked to the car, Carrie slipped her hand into Zoe's. Tara grabbed onto Zoe's leg dramatically until Zoe lifted her into her arms. These girls were the very reason she no longer wasted energy on bitterness. They didn't deserve a mother weighed down by the past. They deserved the woman Zoe had become, and every day, Zoe chose to be her. That evening, after the children were asleep, Zoe stood at the kitchen table reviewing her monthly budget and goals. Not long ago, this routine made her anxious. Now it made her proud. She saw progress in numbers once rooted in fear. She saw a future that felt attainable, not faint. As she closed her notebook, she walked to the window and looked out at the evening sky. The city lights flickered gently, the same way her own hope had flickered years ago, small but persistent. She placed a hand against the glass. "I'm okay," she whispered. This wasn't a declaration. It wasn't something she needed anyone else to hear. It was truth, a truth she had earned. Zoe no longer carried the weight of proving anything to anyone, not to Michael, not to his family, not to the world. She existed now in a space of peace, not because life was perfect. The storm she once survived had become nothing more than a distant memory. Her life, her real life, was here, steady, purposeful, whole. And tomorrow, she would wake again to the sound of laughter, the feel of tiny hands tugging at her, and the knowledge that strength didn't come from never breaking. It came from rising every single time she did. Michael woke the next morning feeling heavier than he had in years, not physically, but everywhere else. The kind of heaviness that settled behind the ribs and refused to move. A weight made of truth, a weight made of consequences. He sat at the edge of his bed with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if it held answers he lost long ago. His wife sat across the room quietly putting on her shoes. She didn't rush, she didn't speak yet. Their silence wasn't angry, it was reflective. Complicated, yes, but steady in its clarity. When she finally looked at him, her expression wasn't cruel or cold. It was simply observant, as if evaluating the man she married and the man she discovered last night. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "I didn't," Michael replied, voice low. "I didn't either." He nodded. It wasn't a surprise. For several moments they said nothing more. Both were replaying the reunion, each from a different emotional lens. His wife finally broke the quiet. "Michael, what do you want to do about all of this?" He inhaled slowly. "I want to be better." She stood, walked toward him, and sat beside him. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that he felt she hadn't given up on him. Wanting is the easy part, she said. Doing is harder. He nodded again. I know. She studied him carefully, searching his face for sincerity. If you're serious about growing, it can't be about guilt. Guilt fades. Change only happens when you choose to confront everything you've avoided. That stung. Not because she said it harshly, but because she said it honestly. I'm ready, he whispered. You weren't ready before. No, I wasn't. She exhaled. Long, slow, steady. Then start now. Later that morning, after she left for her prenatal appointment, Michael sat alone with his laptop, not working, not reading emails, just staring at a blank screen. What do you do when the truth you ignored for years finally knocks the door down? He didn't know, but he knew he couldn't stay the same. He typed 3 words into the search bar. Therapist near me. It felt strange, almost unreal. Therapy was something he always viewed as optional, something other people needed. But yesterday proved something he could no longer deny. He had lived years without ever questioning whether he was emotionally equipped to protect anyone, not even himself. He clicked on the first licensed counselor with open appointments, a woman specializing in relational communication and personal accountability. He booked a session. His hand shook slightly as he hit confirm, not out of fear, out of awareness. This was long overdue. 3 days later, he sat on a soft beige couch in a calm office that smelled faintly of peppermint. His therapist, gentle voice but perceptive, asked him one question that cracked him open completely. What part of your past self do you no longer want to be? He swallowed hard. He thought of Zoe sitting at their old kitchen table, holding her emotions inside because he never gave her space to release them. He thought of the night she cried in silence while he pretended not to notice. He thought of every moment his mother belittled Zoe, and he said nothing. He thought of how quickly he remarried instead of examining the wreckage he'd participated in. He thought of the reunion, of Carrie's face, Tara's face, the resemblance he couldn't deny, the daughters he never met but already loved in some quiet, painful way. I don't want to be the man who avoids truth, he finally said. I don't want to be the man whose silence hurts people. The therapist nodded as though she'd heard that sentence many times before, yet still recognized the weight it carried. That's a beginning, she replied. Now tell me what accountability looks like for you. He spent the rest of the session unraveling layers he had never touched before, not repeating history but examining it, piece by piece. Weeks passed, each marked by therapy sessions that challenged him in ways he didn't anticipate. He learned why he avoided conflict. He learned why he sought approval from his parents long into adulthood. He learned how deeply his silence had become a coping mechanism, not from cruelty but from fear of disappointing his family. He practiced speaking hard truths aloud. He practiced apologizing without defending himself. He practiced listening, really listening, without rushing to justify. His wife noticed changes slowly. He asked about her day more often. He listened more than he spoke. He handled small disagreements with patience instead of tension. He read books on emotional intelligence. He watched videos on fatherhood, on blended families, on repairing trust. But the biggest shift came from something far less dramatic. He stopped running from his reflection. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly honest therapy session, he sat in his car outside a grocery store and drafted a message in the Notes app on his phone. Not to send yet, not a request, not pressure, just truth. It read, I am taking responsibility for the man I was. I am working to grow into someone who deserves to be in my daughter's lives one day. I respect your boundaries. I won't rush you. I just want you to know I'm doing the work. He didn't send it, not yet. The therapist reminded him that healing wasn't about proving anything. It was about becoming someone capable of steady, consistent change. So instead of texting Zoe, he focused on the slow, internal work. He started journaling about what he would want his daughters to know about him someday. He wrote about his regrets, not melodramatically, but honestly, patience, respect, emotional courage. He wrote letters to them he didn't send, letters about how he didn't know they existed, how he wished he'd been stronger when their mother needed protection, how he was learning to become someone better. Even writing those letters made him tremble. But trembles, he learned, were part of growth. Meanwhile, his wife remained watchful, not distant, but cautious. She wanted to believe him. She wanted stability for their unborn child. She wanted integrity in their home. One night, while they folded laundry together, she asked, Do you think Zoe will ever forgive you fully? Michael paused, turning a shirt over in his hands. She already forgave me, he said quietly. She just won't forget. And honestly, she shouldn't. His wife studied his face. Do you still want to be in the twins' lives? Yes, he said, but only if Zoe decides it's healthy for them. Not because I'm entitled, not because I'm their father by blood, because I'm willing to earn their trust. His wife nodded slowly. That's the first time you've explained it without sounding defensive. He gave a soft exhale. I'm trying, I can tell, she said. For the first time in months, her hand reached for his. This time, she didn't pull away. Michael didn't fantasize about sudden reunions or immediate relationships with Carrie and Tara. That wasn't realistic. That wasn't respectful. Instead, he held on to something gentler, the hope of someday becoming a man Zoe could trust near her children. Not soon, not quickly, not without proof, but someday. His therapist said something he carried with him daily. Growth isn't measured by how loudly you change, but by how consistently you show up. So Michael showed up. For therapy, for his marriage, for his unborn child, for himself. He practiced showing up for the future, even if the past still bruised him. He didn't know what Zoe would choose one day, but he knew who he wanted to be when that day arrived. A father worthy of the title. A man who didn't disappear when things got hard. A person who chose truth over comfort. This was not redemption. This was preparation. The slow reshaping of a man finally learning how to grow. Zoe didn't think much about the reunion anymore. The shock, the gasps, Michael's expression, all of it had faded into something distant, something she no longer carried at the front of her mind. Life moved forward, and she moved with it. Not out of avoidance, but because peace had finally settled into her bones, and she refused to let anything disturb it. It was a Saturday morning, warm and bright, the kind of day that made the world feel open. The twins played on the apartment patio, Carrie arranging toy blocks neatly, Tara turning them into imaginary microphones. Their giggles floated into the living room where Zoe folded laundry, humming lightly under her breath. There was nothing extraordinary about the moment, but that was exactly what made it beautiful. Ordinary peace was something Zoe once cried for, prayed for, fought for silently. Now it lived with her. Her mother entered the living room holding a small watering can. She watered the houseplants Zoe kept near the window, plants that somehow survived despite Zoe's inconsistent care. You know, her mother said gently, there was a time you didn't smile like this. Zoe paused, lowering a folded shirt. Yeah, she said softly. There was... Her mother didn't push further. She didn't need to. The acknowledgement alone reminded Zoe of how far she had come. The world she lived in now wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was steady. It was hers. Later that evening, after dinner and bath time, after Tara's dramatic bedtime story reenactment and Carrie's insistence on arranging her blanket just right, the twins finally drifted off to sleep. Zoe lingered by their doorway for a moment. 2 soft breaths, 2 miracles that arrived exactly when they were meant to. She turned off the hallway light, walked to the living room, and sat on the sofa with a cup of warm tea. This had become a ritual, her nightly moment of reflection, the quiet pause between her full day and her next beginning. She thought briefly about Michael, not with anger, not with longing, but with clarity. People often believed closure came from conversations, apologies, or returns, but Zoe knew better now. Closure came from living without bitterness, from choosing yourself after the world told you to shrink, from letting the past be a chapter instead of a wound. Her peace didn't require his participation, her growth didn't require his approval, her joy didn't require his remorse, yet she was grateful, for the lessons, not the pain. Without the collapse of that marriage, she might never have discovered what she was capable of. Without the weight of false blame, she might never have embraced her real worth. Without the shock of that reunion, she might never have seen how completely she had transformed. The universe had a way of bringing truth forward, even when people tried to bury it. And Zoe had learned to stop resisting that truth. Her phone buzzed on the table. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a message. It was a calendar reminder. A quiet note she'd written to herself months ago. You are allowed to be happy. She smiled. She didn't need the reminder anymore, but she appreciated that a past version of herself had cared enough to send one. She set the phone down and closed her eyes briefly. The day had been long, but not heavy. The twins had been loud, but not draining. Everything in her life now felt grounded, stable, filled with purpose. She had no interest in rewriting yesterday. She was too busy building tomorrow. Across town, Michael sat at his desk, writing in the journal his therapist encouraged him to keep. Not a letter this time, not an apology, something else, a reflection. I don't know if Zoe will ever let me close, he wrote, but I understand why. I'm learning that healing isn't something you rush, not hers, not mine. I will respect her boundaries. And if one day she chooses to let me be part of the twin story, I will meet that moment with humility, not entitlement. He closed the journal quietly. His growth wasn't dramatic, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. His wife entered the room softly, carrying a cup of water. You okay? She asked. Michael nodded. Trying, she placed the cup beside him. That's all you can do for now. He appreciated her steadiness. She didn't diminish his regret. She didn't encourage false hope. She supported his accountability. which was something he'd never valued before, but now couldn't live without. As she walked away, he glanced at the journal again. Change wasn't quick, but slow growth was still growth, and for the first time in a long time, he believed he was capable of becoming someone better. Sunday morning sunlight poured through the windows, warm and soft, waking Zoe gently. She stretched, walked into the twins' room, and found them already awake. Tara talking to her stuffed animals, Carrie coloring quietly. They looked up at her with the same smile that melted her every time. "Mommy, pancakes?" Tara asked. "Please?" Carrie added. Zoe laughed. "Yes, pancakes." They raced to the kitchen as if she'd announced a parade. Zoe whipped up batter, letting the girls help stir. Flour ended up on the counter, the floor, and probably their hair, but she didn't mind. These were the moments she wanted them to remember, the ones coded in love, not struggle. After breakfast, they walked to a nearby park, where the girls ran across the playground, shouted each other's names, and climbed structures taller than Zoe preferred. She watched them, heart full, chest steady. Peace didn't mean the absence of challenges. It meant she finally had enough strength to move through life without fear that everything would collapse again. It meant she could breathe. It meant she could smile. It meant she could dream again. That afternoon, as the twins napped, Zoe sat on the couch with her journal. She didn't write often, but today she felt pulled to reflect. She wrote one line at the top of the page. "Peace is not revenge. Peace is release." She thought about that for a long time. The world had taught her to fight for fairness, but life had taught her something deeper, that not all battles were worth fighting, and not all truths needed to be shouted. Some truths spoke for themselves. Carrie and Tara were living proof of that. She closed the journal gently, leaned back, and exhaled a breath that felt like a final release of everything that once held her captive. Her story wasn't about what she lost. It was about what she gained. Strength, clarity, two beautiful daughters who carried both her joy and her resilience. The past had its place, but it no longer had power. Zoe smiled, soft, real, fully healed. Life gives each of us a moment where truth finally rises above silence, a moment where someone who doubted you sees the reality you carried alone, a moment where the world learns that pain does not define you, your response does. Zoe didn't choose revenge. She chose peace. She chose boundaries. She chose growth. She chose herself. So the question is, what would you do if the truth you protected quietly finally confronted the person who left you behind? Would you seek payback, or would you rise the way Zoe did, with grace, with strength, and with the unshakable power of moving on? Let me know in the comments. Your answer says everything about the chapter you're ready to write next. If this story touched you, inspired you, or opened your eyes, please like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need them.